Perfect. Hi, everyone. This is Sweta Regmi. And for my next slide, you would know who I am and why I am here today and why you should hear from me today, okay? I am a founder and CEO at Teach and Do, and we do provide the services to job seekers as well. And it's all customized. We don't do the group sessions, and it's all catered to your industry. And you can check our website, teachanddo.com. All right, so I want you to, I'm not going to go into the whole detail of who I am, but I want you to take a pause and look at it about myself. So I was a previous hiring manager. I still hire at Teach and Do, but I worked in the corporate world for more than 19 years, and I was in a hiring role for more than 13 years. And also I've worked in the nonprofit like YMCA, working close with the job seeker and within the employment services. Also, I'm a guest speaker, regular speaker now in ACCESS Employment and many nonprofit employment agency, plus the podcast and media channel. And for Sentinel College as well, I've done quite a few webinars as well for students. And I am a career conference speaker as well. It's coming up on Wednesday. You can join in there as well. You can follow me on LinkedIn. You'll find the link. I'm also author of 9 ebooks from Teach and Do. Those are all online under ebook sections. And I've also co-authored the book 21 Resilient Women. These are all women coming from different part of the world, immigrant women, and we just wrote our stories. It's available on Amazon. And also, again, I'm one of the top job expert in LinkedIn as well. If you need any free content, free coaching, you can definitely follow me on the LinkedIn. Plus, I'm a career professionals members in CPC Canada as well, which is renowned in Canada. What it does to us is we come together as a career professionals and talk about the industry trends and whatnot to give it back to the community. I'm going to the next slide, but it's not moving. Wait. All right. Now, why am I putting this picture here? Take a look at pictures. Picture actually speaks 1,000 words. So I was an immigrant and I moved from US and States. I was born and raised in Nepal. I came to US and lived there for a bit, and I moved to Canada through PR. Now, why am I showing you this picture? You might be thinking, why, right? I wanted to let you know that no matter what kind of job you're doing right now, you should be proud of it. I am proud of what I did. In order to get here, the first slide that you saw about hiring manager working in the top company, Fortune 500, it took a lot of work. Plus, it took lot of the relationship building, and today's all about relationship building, having those good references. So if you give 110% from from the smaller job you're going to go and do it in Canada, that's your reputations. You should never ever worry about having your ex-boss giving you out the very good references or colleagues or team lead, whatnot. So I want you to take a look at it. Whatever job you're doing right now, that there's a reputation for you. There's a work ethic tied up for you. I've always gone back to my previous managers and I had no problem getting a references from them just because I had built the reputations. So I want you to continue to do that because you don't want to burn the bridge. You never know who you need down in the road. So I want you to be very, very careful on burning that bridge, no matter what kind of work you're doing, even if it's survival for a bit or whatnot, even if you're doing volunteering, does not matter, okay? I hope that makes sense, that you're treating your job seriously from day one in order to get the good references. All right, so now study actually says that everyone, whoever actually, puts through the applications on a resume, 84% of the employers found a lie or misrepresentation on the resume itself. And it's, you probably are not doing it, meaning that it's just lie. I just hope that no one does it, but sometimes unknowingly you're probably doing it as well. So that's why, employers have each, each tools. There are tools in the place for employers to make sure that they are hiring the right candidate, and they are checking whatever you're providing during application stage and resume and interview and whatnot. So what goes on paper, what you say, that does matter. There's no going back later on to fix it. Even if you get the job later on, employers have a right to come back and take it away just because you lied on a resume. Maybe you just, there are so many examples. We're going to go through it later on, and it would be crystal clear to you that you got to make sure that you provide the right detail, so it does not come back to you in future. So what do they do? Examples of lies, right? Like, you might not know, just by putting a date. Let's say you work there for 1 year and you're saying 2 years, that's a lie, right? And they can verify that. And we're going to go through it later on, how they can verify that, even the months. And also dates and tenure as well. Even let's say you had held multiple roles, and if you're not clear on the date, find out, but don't put anything that you're not sure about it, because it would come back later on and they will ask you and you have no idea, how to just, now make it up, right? So have the right fact from day one. There's no going back, and you don't want to use that. You don't want them to use against, like you, right? So title of the previous job matters as well. So for newcomers, I don't know how many of you guys are watching the newcomers. So what happens is, there are probably different titles back home. One of the example I want to talk about is, let's say you're a sales manager back home, but it's the same kind of job that you're targeting here. And you're targeting a sales manager, but there's no title, but you know that you can do the job, and maybe the title is sales coach, because the title has to match as well, and some people actually put it in there. But be very cautious about picking the title and changing the title. If it's 100% match, and this is it, but the title is something that it's probably different back home, and it's different here, then you are allowed to put certain title on it, providing the fact that your manager is aware of it, that you put that title. If the references if there's a reference check happening in the background, the management should know, your boss should know that you put that title, and they're okay with it as well. Make sure you run it by with anyone that you would probably put them on a reference, okay? So responsibilities as well. A lot of few folks and a lot of people, they try to brag about it. There's nothing wrong with it, stretching your responsibilities, but there's a blatant lie that you can put it in there. If you've never worked on that particular area, and if you've shown that you've worked, then you know what, that's a lie as well. Just be very careful on stretching your responsibility, okay? And also, many employer, what they want is they want the professional resume. And I've seen people putting personal references, such as, your colleagues or friends or family members. Be very cautious about it. They want what they want. You have to make sure that you follow the protocol and rules, and they're well aware of it. And if you don't have a reference, professional references in Canada, we can go back. We can talk about it later on in next slide, but you got to follow that protocol. And the gap as well, employer could, if you make up, some people would have gap in employment. If you make up some things and it's a lie, it's going to come back. But there are things that you can put it on the resume to cover the gap, but you got to be very, very careful, not create something that you're not doing right now. It has to be relatable, and it has to make sense as well. So I just wanted to let you know that most employer, they don't conduct the background check directly until they have conditional offer, meaning that you pass those screening and you've passed the interview as well. But there are some employers, they would probably start asking you for references, and we're going to go through that. Who would that be normally? So the background checks. So what are the background checks? When you look at it, what happens is there are so many things that different people do it differently. So identifying the verification is one of the key, your ID, and also criminal history, your driving records as well, and professional license verification, especially if you're an engineer. If you're on to the regulated industry, employers are allowed to go back and verify that as well, up to the point that they can contact the industry. Also, your education history as well, they are allowed to ask you for the original as well. Just have those all handy, because whatever you put it on a resume, you should be able to provide that evidence if it's requested by employers. So be very mindful of putting a date, graduation date and everything if you're putting it through. And even if it's expired, a lot of people, what they do is they expire and they make it look like a current. And make sure that you are actually honoring, you're actually following the protocol when you're providing those certifications, because expire certification means nothing, right? So criminal history is checked as well in Canada, like, police report. And if you're, one of the rule of thumb is if you have the common name, then and your date of birth matches with the other person, you might have to go with the fingerprints as well. And most nonprofit, if you want to work for most nonprofit and government, certain sectors, they require the vulnerable check, which is thoroughly, that includes everything. If you are a past offender and whatnot, you can Google what's a vulnerable check, and it will give you all those details on it. So the other thing is, if you've lived outside of Canada, certain, like, after a certain month, then you might be required to produce the police report from each of those countries. And it could apply to the newcomers as well. I know that when you come to Canada, you actually are supposed to provide the police report in order to move in, but like, have that, if you have the copy of it, just, request it and bring it along with you. So that way, if employers are wanting that again, you don't have to go back again and request it. Have that copy or whatever, if you could, from back home as well. And also, the company could probably reach out directly to the different country, or they might ask you to get it back to them. And it's happened to some of the job seeker I work with in top companies like Amazon. If they lived in, like, Switzerland before, and if they moved in Canada, like, with the PR, they've asked for those police report from there as well. It happens with a lot of companies. It's a norm. It's not a shocking incident. Okay. So the other thing is, people don't know, but like the driver's license, what happens is there's an abstract on driver's license that actually gives you everything away, which is, again, driving under influence is one of the factor employers actually look for as well. So if you have any record of, being on a DUI, like, that stays in the record. And if your job is actually one of those which is quite related with some kind of driving vehicle of the company, or maybe you're using your own vehicle to actually transport or meeting clients and everything, they have full right to go and ask for those details as well. And drug test, especially in the healthcare sector, even if you're not doctors or whatever, you're not directly dealing with the patient. If you're working within the healthcare industry, they will ask you for vaccination report, and they will do the drug test and stuff like that too. So just, if you have the record already from back home, just bring it with you. And if not, then they might ask you to go get it done as well. Okay. So to avoid the discrimination lawsuit, normally what has been happening now is most employers are hiring a third party for reference checks. So they are not biased, and they just get the report and they make the decision based on that as well. So don't be alarmed when the company themselves do not call you, but it's a third party calling you. It's completely normal, but make sure that you actually are called by the company's rep, right? They're licensed people. So I don't know if you know, if you're a newcomer, Canada has the steps when you go through the driving license, G1, G2, G. You can Google it and find out. And employer could, although employer cannot ask you can you drive or not, but at the same time there are some jobs that requires the driver's license, and they could actually make a mandate requirement that you need to have full G, which is full G license, and they can actually put it as a prerequisite before you even apply for a job. And if you say yes, they would require those on the file as well. Okay. And I'm not sure if you know that there are countries when you move from outside, you can go to driver's license office, and then you can straight exchange it, go and find out, but then for that you need some kind of like IDP driver's permit, which is valid in Canada as well. Check in your country to get one before you arrive, and check if your country qualifies under direct exchange for licenses. Normally you have to be experienced driver, you have to be driving for a couple of years. So this is really huge because I work with a lot of financial, I come from the banking world, and I know so, and I've personally been involved in these references check as well sometimes. So a lot of people don't know is the newcomers who come in Canada and who want to go to the banking sector, they feel like they're ready to go. But number one pointers, if you want to go into the banking sectors or financial industry, the credit score is one of the mandate everyone requires, because you are actually dealing with someone else's money. Even if you're not dealing with the money, even if you want to go to operations, anything like that, there has to be sufficient credit history. So take a look at it. What are the good, very good, and fair and poor credit? Every bank has their own mandate. Some tend to hire excellent people only, excellent score only. Some tend to go with the very good, and some could go with the fair. But every bank has their own policy, and if they hire someone with the bad credit, then that's illegal liabilities for them as well, right? So there are a couple of things that you can do in order to speed up the credit history. So what happens is make sure that you pay the credit on time, but pay it on the time. And before that, how do you build it? Try to build a relationship with the bank in Canada, top 5 in Canada, and have the bundle product with them, and you would be able to get those first credit card, so you can start the credit going. And don't be afraid to use a credit card. Pay it. Usually you will have a grace period, and keep on using the credit card, because some people, what they do is they just get the credit and don't actually use it, and that serves no purpose, because that's not how you build a credit. So you have to continue using it, pay it on the time. After a couple of days, let the credit build up. So that shows the history, and that's how you build the history as well. So and also the other thing that I've had, one scenario was one of the client was declined for during reference check. And when I asked, like, how come, like, do you have a credit history? She said she was the authorized individual on her husband's card. So that doesn't do anything. You cannot be authorized user on the card to build the score. You have to have your own separate credit card. Be mindful of just being an authorized user. It does not build your credit card. So you got to make sure you have your own separately. It's like your ID, your identifications kind of thing, right? And also, if you can't find anyone, because you don't have income and sources, because you have to qualify for it sometimes, so you want to make sure you get some guarantor, and guarantors are only supposed to be immediate family members, blood relative, and then they can be guarantors. So that's how you can start building credit in Canada as well. And also, there are free scores for those of you who want to know what your credit score is already. If you're in Canada, you can go to borrowall.com and Credit Karma, and it actually gives you the credit score. It also gives you who is checking your credit regularly, stuff like that. So if someone does the soft check, that means the credit score doesn't go down, but someone does the hard check, there's a point that it goes down as well. So you don't want to keep on applying for the credit after, credit, especially if you're trying to build it. Just go and then just apply for one, stick to it, so that way the people can just see how good are you with the history, and that's what they're looking at. And then sometimes what happens is if your ID got stolen or you ended up in like, bad credit score because of bad divorce or family issues or health reason, there are some employers, they would probably ask you as well what happened, but most likely they don't do it because you're a risk to them. But you could potentially like, talk about it as well. So I highly recommend if they come back to you with the questions, highly recommend to be transparent and see where do they go from, okay? So consider volunteering in Canada when it comes to reference check, because there are only few employers that are going to contact people from back home, right? Especially for newcomers. It's international. They don't have a time for it. They want to move. Time is money. They want to move it like right away, right? Especially when there's a conditional offer. Make it very easy for them, because they're not going to go through the hoops just to make sure that you get hired. It's your responsibility to make sure you make it easy for them. So one of the things is volunteering in Canada, especially as a Canadian work experience as well, and to use them as a reference as well, and reach out. A lot of people, what they do is they feel like, well, no one's gonna, I don't have any people to volunteer, but reach out to smaller business. They might need people like you. They might be able to use your expertise. Reach out to your own ethnic community. If you're from India, if you're from Nepal, if you're from Bangladesh, right? Like, you have like, great organizations there. They are going to be helping new immigrant, non-resident people, right? Reach out and see if you can somehow help them, and use some of those people from the board members as a references as well, because now they know you as well, okay? And always make sure that when you're applying for the job, don't leave it to them, because they have no idea you applied for a job and what kind of job you applied for it. Coach them, those are the strengths that they're looking for on this, and I really want you to highlight that, right? And things like that, just go ahead and highlight that for them, so that way it makes it really easy for them to actually talk about it. Even email them in advance. I've applied for this job. You're supposed to, by the way, out of courtesy, ask them anyway that, can I put you on a reference? Do not ever put anyone on a reference without asking. And later on, when you know that you put them on a reference, make sure that you email them what's the job. Make sure you email them out job descriptions and talk about, these are the strengths and these are my weaknesses. I would love for you to talk about it if they ask you. And we're going to go through the questions later on, how they rate you. So nonprofit and government, normally what happens is when you are applying online, they are the one right now still using the old, the system. They really want you to put the references, 3 or 4 references online. And that's going to be hard for you if you don't actually have a reference already. So it's always best idea to have a reference from day one. You have it just in case they ask. They would not call you without asking, but you might want to make sure that you use the right references from day one. You never know what happens in the background, right? And I recommend having at least 3 or 4, because if one person drops out, then you at least have like other 3 out there, so you don't have to scramble in the last minute. So here are a couple of things behind the scene, and you probably don't know. Do you think that employer just sticks to like, what you give? No, there are people, they actually go overboard, and I've seen it because it's their reputation line, right? Hiring costs are really, really, really expensive, and they don't want to hire the bad fit. They want to check the fact provided. So they don't have to use the phone number you provided for a company. They can research on their own. They can go and go to the switchboard at the company reception area and just find out about you and about the references they provided. So for example, if your ex-boss, you provided the reference for ex-boss, they can even find out if the ex-boss actually worked there and how long and his title and whatnot as well. So be very mindful of providing the references for people who no longer work within that, within that department. Because some people, what they do is they just provide it, but like they put it as the past employer. But if you don't find out where your boss is, you have no idea, then you technically lied, right? And you're delaying the process. So make sure you have up-to-date references. Also, they can verify licenses and educations, and some employer might ask you to attach credential as the at the application stage. There are colleges and university. They will say they want you to attach those certifications and the diploma or whatever the degree while you're applying for it. If you don't do that, your application would be automatically you would be failing the application stage, right? So follow that instructions. And by the way, and a lot of people don't think that whatever I do in my personal life, that's none of their business. That's not true. Although there's a law in place that you're protected as a job seeker, but anything that you are posting it publicly and it's available to public, they can make a judgment on it and form an opinion about you. So that way, they can determine if you're the right fit or not, because, you are going to be their employee, and they can totally look into the reference and see if you're the right fit. And make sure you clean your social media, the stuff that you don't want to see your grandmother, maybe take it off or just put it on the friends list only. Okay. So the law in the place, obviously, I'm sure they cannot deny, employers cannot deny you the job offer, even if it comes in the references, whatever it is, based on the racial factor, ethnic background, political opinion and views, history of your health and gender and marital status and, anything, who you are. And also one more thing is, if you've been convicted and if you were pardoned, if you've done something bad, and if you're pardoned, they're not allowed to make a judgment on that as well. There's a law in place for that. And all the backgrounds should be reasonable to the needs of the job and done with the informed consent. If they want to check the credit history, they have to ask you. They cannot sneakingly go and check the credit. They also ask you for SIN number at that time as well. So that way they know who you are as well. And also you have to have a valid SIN number, by the way, to work in Canada, a valid SIN number. Okay. And then also you need to give consent for police report, and anything they wanted to ask, you need to make sure you say yes to that. So these are the questions that normally they ask, and there are a lot of employers, they go through the different kind of questions. So when I get the requests for references for people they worked for me in the past or currently, they ask me things like this, and it's totally based on the industry and the job role they're applying for. Some people, they just want to hear yes or no. Some people want detail, but as an employer, they have a right to say just stick to yes or no, or right to provide the detail as well. And employers are really cautious to provide any bad references, because technically you can come back and sue them later on if it's not the right information. So most of the employer, they have stopped providing the references. They only do the fact check now, and it has to go through the HR. Managers don't even provide the references because they don't want to get involved on it, right? And a lot of people don't even know how do you answer the reference questions. So the people in the organization's top industry, there are specific HR department, they only are handling the references. So you find out, so before you put someone's name on it as a reference, you need to find out if they're allowed to even go and provide the references, because they are liable, and there's a strict policy for employers not to provide one and stick to the fact. So some of the example you can see is terms on which the employer's person's employment ended and why. That's a really vague questions, and people people can give away so much without giving you away. It's like, were you fired kind of thing, although they can ask you. But there are so many things as an employer. If you really had a toxic boss, you should not probably put them on a reference. First of all, you should have someone else, right? So please, and then they will talk about describe the working relationship with an applicant, right? Like, supervisor, client, a peer, and what was the time frame during which you were working for them. What were the applicant primary responsibilities, right? That's where it comes out. So they would ask you the responsibilities based on what you put it on the resume. So if it's not matching up, there's a red flag for you. And so the would you consider rehiring the person is the big one. If you got fired because of bad attitude, whatever it is, employers could potentially say not able to answer or no. And you're screwed, right? So you gotta be very careful on putting the references, or be very own that. And things happen, maybe you were on the wrong job, like maybe it was a toxic environment. Be very transparent. There's no point of hiding why you don't work there anymore, right? So own it, so that way it does not come in the last minute. Employer can ask any issues with the attendance and performance, and also strength and weaknesses SWOT, like they can go through it. And if let's say that you are so your employers are not able to answer that, some employers, what they do is we can't go on a phone, it needs to be documented, can you send us an email, we'll write it. Employer can actually ask for email references as well. So I've done that for my people. When I was really super busy on a phone, I would tell them, can you email me, I'll just send it back to you, right? So it is completely normal, and don't be alarmed with it. And it's more detailed. Just coach your references, that's the best way. And one thing that I want you to understand is, what, if you are getting job, right, and then later on, whatever reason, after reference check, you're failing it, chances are there's something wrong with it. You might want to cross check your previous employer to see what are they saying. Jump on the phone, have someone call in on your behalf, and just try to see what are they saying, right? Maybe there's something that you would not know, you're blindsided on it, right? And then there's a process in place that you can follow. But again, there's something wrong with it. If you're failing a reference check, it could be something like credit score as well. Find out, know what are the steps involved before, and to make sure that you correct that for future. So these are some example that you can see. This is real things that they use. There's a rating system when the HRs, now keep in mind, HR professionals are trained how to do the reference check. And without that, good company actually goes with the process. There's a process and protocol to follow, and you can see what are the things. One of the real example of what are the thing, they would ask, they would gather information, so that a bunch of information to come to the point of if they're a right fit or not. So they can talk about the competencies, skills and everything. There are so many things. So people, organization partners, and they ask all about evidence, and they actually record the comments. They're writing everything your employer is saying as well. So it needs to be clearly documented, just in case if you go back and sue them, they have a documentation going on. They actually have to put it on the system. So that way it's all documented. Right employers and good employers are very good at protecting themselves. So there are more information provided on this. The government site, you can take a look at it as well. This is straight taken from there, the examples and everything. So the other thing is, what you can also see is over here, you can see, are you aware of any areas that could be developed by the applicant in relationship with the competency? These are all the questions. It's rated. And then also they would ask your employer, okay, what are the areas? Can you give us an example as well? So it's really the good company actually go in a very deep, if they really want to hire a good fit, they will go in a detail. And references I do references all the time. It takes more than 30 to 45 minutes. And I don't provide references for the people I'm not comfortable. I only provide for a few people only when I know that they're really good, a good team worker. So where you can find the references. So when you look at it, some people might think that it's only current manager. That's not true. Take a look around. And obviously it depends on the employer's choice as well. What do they ask? So right now, your boss, previous manager, your mentors, and board members. So if you're part of some board members, if you formed a good relationship, you've done something, those could be used as a references as well. Your colleagues or seniors who worked in the same project, they can talk about those projects. project. Your trainer, if you've taken some courses, you can add them as references as well. Your coach, if you had any coach, you can put there in there too. Community members as well who are part of the organizations, who have some title, who can validate, you can put them as well. Teacher or professor as well, you can put them as a reference. And your clients, if you are doing side hustle, you have your own business, you want to get back to the market, and if it validates, if that's one of the known industry, then you can certainly put your client as the reference as well, and your partners and vendors as well. If you had your own business and you're dealing with the partners and vendors, you can add them as well. So there are so many things you can do when it comes to references, but always ask the employers if they're okay to accept it. Some employers just say no, just a past few bosses. Some employers can be okay with it too. Be very transparent on it. So now the other thing is I wanted to talk to you about is if you want free resources, there are so many free resources on Teaching Do website. You can go and see there's a link, more than 100 links for a job link in Canada. If you are landing soon, if you're already landed, there are the link, you can download it for free. It's under more when you go on more, and then there's two right now. We plan to put more on it. And also newcomers guide, it has a lot of information that you need in order to settle in Canada or before you come in Canada as well. You can go ahead and download it as well. It's going to be there for limited time only. Go ahead and download. It's a PDF format, and you can just, honestly, it's a gold nugget for you. There are remote jobs. There's an industry who is hiring, in banking to engineering to doctors in engineer, bridging program, everything is there, including the immigration link as well in there from the right sources. It's provided for you for free in there. So, and if you want to actually get in touch with Teaching Do and know, about the career tips and services, what we do, you can also contact us through Contact Us page, and free resources right here. And you can follow me at LinkedIn as well if you want to continue to get the career tips and guides. And we're all over in social media, and we also have a YouTube channel as well, completely. And it's a mix of everything, the job interviews and personal branding and whatnot. One of the things, if you're newcomers right now watching, there's one video that went a lot of people, we got a feedback from the newcomers. It was helpful. No Canadian experience, and there's 5 steps to break the barrier. Watch those videos and subscribe, so that way you continue to actually have good job search tools and resources before landing in Canada, even after landing in Canada. I think I'm good.
Thank you so much, Shweta. We can start taking up questions, and I can see that people have already put some questions in here. Are vulnerable checks and police reports free? And if not, is the employer expected to pay for these?
It depends on the employer. So I know one time when I applied for nonprofit, I had to pay it. It's not free. I think there was, you got to check it. I think it was I paid a couple of years ago, $45 or something. Vulnerable was a little bit more. It's not free at all. Check with the department, but employers normally sometimes they do it on their own, but there are employers, they would say, go get it for us.
Thank you. And how does an employer check if the candidate has worked for a company located in another country? Do they call them? Do they email them? How does that work?
Oh, they have a choice to email them. They can do whatever they want to. They would go there and then find out information. So that's, they don't have to stick with whatever you provide them. If it's a reputed company, they're going to go to the switchboard. It all depends on, what kind of employer it is. If it's a top company, they have their own people there, for reference check. They have a third party. You don't expect Amazon in US to actually, Canada to actually just call. They would have outsourcing party already in that country, right? So they have their own tools and resources.
Thank you. And you spoke about credit checks as well. So if credit check decrease your score each time you check, what should they do? Is it a big hit that they take on their credit check, or?
So what happens with the credit check? There's a soft credit check and hard credit check. So when employers are doing the credit check, it's not normally the hard. It's supposed to be soft, but you never know. But when banks are actually opening the account, when you open the account, it's normally the hard check. So that's why a lot of newcomer, what they do is they go and apply, and the score goes down. And plus, the other people are thinking like, why are you seeking so much credit when you're new in Canada? So that's why it depends on the purpose of why you're opening the credit card. If it's mortgages, that's a different story. But if to build it, just start with one. But I'm not the credit advisor, but there are people, get the help from the right people. Stop listening to the family and friends. Go and get the advice from the financial advisor. But at the same time, be mindful of it. Too much credit card, which is open, that's a high risk for you because you can go and rack it up anytime. Be cautious about it. And one of the incident that one of the newcomer, actually what they did was they would go apply for a credit card and they did it. And then they got the card and then they will charge the credit card, they will pay. And then next day they're paying it off. And no wonder their credits are not built because you're not even giving chance to build a credit. So it takes a couple of days for a credit to be reported. So if you can't, if you're not showing history, your credit scores are not going up. So be mindful of it. You have a grace period, between 20 to 25 days or something. So wait for it. Don't pay the interest. But though your thing is to build a credit. So use it, and there's a guideline how to use it. You don't want to max out the credit card either, not 80%. You should probably use up to 60% only. So that way you're not living off the credit. So do the homework. Don't max out, guys, because that actually brings the score down as well. There's so many criteria. You can Google it, what not to do when it comes to credit score, to make sure that you're staying up to the standard.
Thank you. So next question here is about volunteering. If you've been volunteering somewhere for some time, how long can you wait to ask them to be a reference?
It all depends on the relationship, right? If you're doing the right job and if you're volunteering, there's always give and take, right? So any organization, when you're volunteering, again, it depends on their level as well. Are they willing to do that? Is there a policy that they don't allow the volunteering? But I know a lot of nonprofit, when you volunteer with them, they're okay with it, but you have to have that relationship. Now, coming to my second slide, right? You cannot force someone to be a reference. You got to be so good at it that people can't say no. I mean, if I had a really good employee who reported to me, I never said no to them. But if I felt like I don't want to be putting my name online, I've said no. I would say, unfortunately, I don't do the references anymore. I pick and choose as well. So you've earned that trust, then you deserve that. But if you feel like you've not done the right work, then the answer is with you. Go and ask and see.
Thank you. What happens if your reference is not working at your previous employer anymore? What if they're what if they're working somewhere else?
That's fine. That's fine. Because the person was your ex-boss and the person's moved on, you're fine with it. So they would normally ask, previous reference organizations and everything. That's fine. They will ask you at that time, did you report to this person? If he confirms yes, you're good to go. And they can go even above it. That's when the employer are going to be like, okay, did he really work on to the past company, right? They can go that far too. So be mindful of providing the right reference.
Thank you. And what if you are an independent consultant with a company? Can you use someone from that company for a referral?
Absolutely. It depends on the policy again. I'm going back to the policy. Some people are allowed to, some people not. But then there are a lot of people, they would say, you know what, I can act as a references under under the table, kind of personal references. So, and they can do that as well. So some few folks would do it. Even the company says you know what, you're not personally allowed to give professional reference, but it's up to you to do the personal reference, and they do that as well. Check with the policy and check with the person if they're comfortable.
Thank you. And do employers inform candidates if they failed reference checks or credit checks?
They don't say fail. They would say, unfortunately, we're not able to, right? We've decided to go with somebody else, right? Some employer could come back and say, it has happened to me once, not me. but I referred someone within my company, and the person was great, did the interview, good to go hire. And unfortunately, the person actually had filed for bankruptcy and consumer proposal that I had no idea about, right? It's none of my business to ask people, hey, do you have a credit history? How good is your credit history, right? So I figured the person figured it out. And then later on, because I was close friend with the hiring manager said, yeah, he filled the reference check because apparently there's a bad credit, right? Like, I don't know if, and he was never told, but I knew it, right? I knew it. And I actually told him, like, this is what it is. If you want to work in the banking industry, you got to build a credit, right? But employers are not going to disclose that information, at least to my understanding.
Thank you. And peers, colleagues, can they, like, if they're in the same lateral position, can they give references as well?
Absolutely. And again, depends on what employers, your future employer wants, but you can always put them on it. Yeah, especially if you've worked in the same project, you can absolutely go ahead and do it because they know. It all depends on the policy, but you can.
Does the reference need to know what they did before they started working at that company?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Like the person that the reference you've given them, do they need to know like your past work experience as well, or just what
No,
you've
just
done
for
in
that,
that
just for
company?
that role, just for that
Okay.
role.
Okay, so long question here. What are your thoughts on responding to a reference request for someone who you don't feel strongly about? So in other words, how best should you respond to reference check on a person who you won't feel comfortable talking positively about?
The ball's in your court, right? Like here's
Yeah.
the thing, if the person, to me, it sounds like, why are you on even a reference sheet for that
Mm-hmm.
person? So the first step is the person didn't inform you. Then you have a choice to say, unfortunately, I don't provide references, right? You can just stick to that. Or the person actually, said, can I put you in a reference? And you said yes. Then now you are responsible for it. You should never say yes to the people like you're not comfortable with it and say, unfortunately, I don't want to be part of references. I don't deal with that, right? You don't have to say you're not the right fit, but you can definitely say, like, unfortunately, I don't do that. And that's what I do. If I don't want to act as a reference, I don't say, like, you know what, you're not the right fit. I would just say, unfortunately, I'm not able to. And people, like, they've reported to me 10 years back, they still come back to me for references for the people they know that I would provide them a good references, right? So it all depends on the relationship. And some people, you would always get it like out of whack. It's okay, well, I didn't even know, like, I didn't even know that you had me in a references. That's something you can coach them, like, buddy, if you want it, just communicate with me, right?
Thank you. And how do you get security clearances, like as a newcomer?
Security clearances, meaning, like, I don't know what you're talking about. If it's a police report, then obviously in Canada, right? Security, and obviously there are so many things. Employer actually would give you what they want, and what kind of security clearances you want. Normally it's a RCMP check, police report, normally in Canada, and there might be something for regulated industry that they would actually tell you where to go and where to get it from.
Thank you. And would volunteer references count as professional references?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Because you don't have nobody, like, what else you're supposed to do. So you need to have a references. References is something that, guys, like, someone can vouch on you. Someone knows your work ethic and you've done the good job. That's all it is. And people have requirement, follow that requirement, but everything counts as a references for you.
And do banks allow candidates to explain why they had bad credit or a criminal record?
Absolutely. So there are bank, underwriter. What happens is I work in the banking industry on loan and mortgages and, like, the loans and stuff. When my staff used to decline people, like, underwriter would go back and say missing information before declining the application. It would be put back on the different queue if they want to, and they would say, okay, we see something, late payments around this area, or we see something happen. There's a collections, like, what happened. It depends on the bank, but, like, they definitely try to work with you. And if you have a good story and, like, you can provide the evidence. And sometimes people even keep, if your identity was, there was like, identity theft, anything like that. And if you have police report from back in those days, they might ask you for evidence as well, right? So be mindful of there's evidence that you could, provide if like, you're willing to work with them. Yeah, bank could ask, and it depends on the policy of the bank.
And where do you put your employer references? Like, do you put them on your resume? Like, where does that go?
It doesn't, no. I'm so glad that whoever asked that question. In Canada, you don't put the references on before you apply. I see still the old style of references available in request. Please remove that from resume. They don't need it unless some employer, what they do is when you, again, some of the government, when you go online, they would want your supervisor name and title and whatnot, right? Like, beforehand, you've got to put it in there. And some employer, what they do is come with the references at the time of interview, and you can bring it and don't give it to them unless they ask. That's it. So reference process normally with the legality is you should be only asking for reference check when you know the person is a right fit, and now that's an extra step. It only should happen when you have extended the offer and say, like, it's pending on your references. That's the policy in the market right now. But there are some employers, they actually have a different practice. Before extending the offer, they do the reference check as well, which has happened with my clients. Yeah.
Thank you. And what if you had issues with your only employer in Canada? Like, what do you do? Do you use that employer as a reference? What
Absolutely.
would you do
So I would rephrase it differently. So I would not say you had a bad relationship. Some of the clients who got fired, I coach them to actually tell them, okay, well, my boss might not be able to provide you the reference because they might have a policy. How about I give you the HR number and you can confirm the title and the date of employment, and they would be able to do that because employer can't say no to that. It's a fact check, right? And you can actually tell them, they might not give you the references, but here's the HR number. You can go and check it out. So that's fine. You don't have to go into the detail.
Thank you. And can you volunteer from outside of Canada?
Depends on the country. Like normally, no, I would say no. But again, depends on the organization. Would they allow you to? It all depends on the employer's choice.
And can you submit a reference letter from the previous employer instead
It
of?
depends. It depends.
Okay.
If employers are the reference letter. So there's a way to do it. It's your personal branding, right? Like, if you, I'm jumping into the different thing, but like, sometime what you could do is you can use that reference letter and take out bits and pieces from it. And if you have LinkedIn, you can put it on the About Me sections. This is what my ex-employer thinks about me, right? There's a way to do it as well. That's your personal branding, and you can put it on the cover letter. You can even, in fact, put it on the resume as well as a code. There's so many things. I teach people how to actually get those and sprinkle it around, and so people know who you are.
Thank you. So here a point is, if it was a lie to reference a previous manager who left the company, can you explain that again? You said something about lying to a reference of a previous manager who left the company.
Yeah, so some people, what they don't understand is, like, when they say previous employer, like, recent previous employer, they put your manager as that manager, previous employer in there. But like, maybe he was not your previous employer. Maybe the person was working there, but the person is no longer working there, whatever it is, right? So make sure you find out what the person is. Person has a same title that you're saying too. Some people, what they do is, just because they're working in the same company, you might not be reporting to that manager. Let's say one of the example. So previous boss, yeah, but then just because that person actually worked with you in the same project, but he was not your direct report, you never reported to him, he's not your previous boss, right? And that could see, like, when they can verify in HR, if this person was the manager within this department, that comes out as a lie because you provided someone you never reported and you created them as a boss. Unless you worked with them on a project, be very specific about it.
Thank you. And how far back do you check employment? Like 5 years, 10 years?
Anytime. Normally it's a previous company, previous,
Most recent,
whatever you
yeah.
provide. Yeah, most recent one. And it all depends on the employers.
Can you have more than one reference from the same company?
Absolutely. I've done that. So it depends. I've had a CFO, I personally, when I was a job seeker, after I got laid off, I had CFO, I had the VP of the company, I had my, director who I reported to as well, 3 of them, good references. So they all vouch for me, right? You can definitely do that. Yeah. But you have to have one boss that you reported to, but then the more senior is better as well, right? So totally up to you.
Can a coach be counted as a reference?
Absolutely. So there's a coach, you work with it, whatever it is, and absolutely you can put them as a references. Yeah.
And we are actually at the end of the time. I'll take one more question here. Okay. Sorry, I don't get that one. Just picking a question that hasn't been asked already. What are the details required to be provided for employer reference? Like what would they ask for?
I just went on this slide. Go back and maybe you joined a little bit later, but there are so many questions like your strengths, weaknesses, what were you good at, performance, attendance issues, are you coachable? Are you a team worker? Did you get along with the team? Did you fail any deadline? Honestly, to be honest, if I were to go back, it would be the same kind of interview questions that you were asked. That's it. One question that I wanted to, I think there's one question that came along. I wanted to talk to you about it is, how you said, how can they check references without actually even verifying it? Just so you guys know, I don't know if you know, but on the credit bureau, TransUnion, Equifax, when you go in there, it actually tells you the company that you're working with it and the date and title as well, just so you know. That's how they verify and match as well, just so you know. They don't even have to call the employer if they pull the credit on you. They can see everything, the dates and everything there, and your title, your company in Canada and US as well, because we share the same credit. TransUnion and Equifax in US and Canada are the same, and they can even verify it. If you're working there, you've moved to Canada, you can do that. And by the way, if you don't have a credit in Canada and you actually move from US, you can use the social security number to apply, and they will manually underwrite your file as well. That's a tip for you if you want to build a score in Canada.
Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, not at all. I don't know. I would love to get your feedback. I have open messages on LinkedIn, and I would love to hear from you what I can do differently next time. And if there's any feedback that what kind of topic I can bring for you, especially if you're newcomers in Canada, you've landed in Canada, or people who are watching me as a job seeker, be sure to reach out, follow my content, and I have open messages. And if you're in Canada, I would love to hear from you and see how I can help you to bounce back in Canada. Okay.
Thank you so much.